Today, I'm doing something that I feel is very exciting. It's also emotional. The topic of cord blood banking and cord tissue banking is quite a big topic right now, and everybody's thinking about whether they should do it or not, and trying to make the right informed decisions. And we hear a lot about the banks and what goes on and how much it costs, but we don't hear a lot about when those stem cells are actually used. And I know as I was making that decision, it sort of seemed a little bit like this mystical science that wasn't really here yet. And while banking may be a good idea, could we really use those cells yet? Were we just hoping on a discovery in the future? And I learned that, in fact, these stem cells are being used to save lives today. And so we have the honor, and I have the honor of having Tammy here, who used stem cells from one of her children to save the lives of another. And we're fortunate enough to be able to hear her story. So thank you so much for coming and sharing that, because I know it can't be easy. And I'm a parent, and I can't even begin to imagine what you've been through. But also, I imagine very thankful that it was possible. So could you just take us back to sort of the beginning and your story?
Well, thank you for having me here and letting me share. December 3rd, 2006, my son had been complaining of his ankle hurting for a couple of days. I picked him up from childcare because I was working, and he was limping, and he said his ankle hurt, but he was 4. So then 5 minutes later, he was playing with his brother, and he was fine. And so it's hard to tell at that age because symptoms change, but I brought him to the doctor, and they did an x-ray, and I knew it wasn't broken because I'm a physical therapist, and I looked at it, and so I asked if they would do a blood test because I was trying to figure out why in the world he was having this pain, or if it was even real, because sometimes it didn't hurt him. And the hospital called me and they said, "Is this Mrs. Bird? Are you sitting down? We have some bad news. Your son's blood test came back with a very, very high white count. We want you to pack a bag for yourself and your son and come to the hospital. And we don't know how long you'll be here, but you're going to be here for a while." And I was pregnant at the time as well. I was 5 months pregnant. And within a couple hours, they told me that he had cancer.
That's okay.
Yeah, there's nothing that can prepare you for that life. They believed he had leukemia, and they would do further testing, but he needed to start treatment immediately. They have different levels of categorization of the therapies, and this was the most aggressive, most advanced. So it would be a miracle, honestly, if he lived through it all. Either he'll die very quickly, you take away the treatment and he'll die quickly, or you go through this aggressive chemotherapy program that offers 20% chance at 5 years survival, or possibly a bone marrow transplant. So it was just very dark. Any of those roads you look down, they're not promising.
So I can't imagine there's just one piece of really negative information after the next. So after that, when was the point which you learned about the possibility of banking cord blood and the possibility of that being able to help in a transplant?
They didn't do transplants where we were at, and so the doctor referred us to U of M. Pretty much our only hope was a bone marrow transplant, and they would only consider a transplant from a family member, not outside our family, because just the chance of death was so high. And we had my husband tested it, myself, and my 3-year-old, and we all came back negative as a match. And so they told us to bank our baby's cord blood. So the only hope left was the baby that I was pregnant with at the time.
Did you know at the time when your pediatric oncologist brought this idea up, have you heard of stem cell banking before, cord blood banking? Or
It was fairly new at the time. This was 2006.
Right.
And I had received a postcard in the mail from ViaCord, and I had brought that into my OB. And I remember throwing it away at my first prenatal visit. She said, "Tammy, no one uses that. You're healthy. You don't have any history that you don't need. That's just, she was trying to be a friend and save me money. So she said, "You don't need it." So I threw it away. And of course, that's what you think of when they tell you. Yes. You go back to that moment and think, why didn't I bank it?
I think that's a really good point, though. I have 4 kids too, and I've had similar experiences when asking. And I think the thing for people to know how new it is, and doctors are amazing and experts at what they do, but they don't necessarily know about some of the new sciences out of their area.
Yeah, and how in the world would she ever know that she couldn't, I would have never dreamed anything like that could ever happen to me or my family. And maybe that's just ignorance or pride, I don't know, but I would have never thought that could happen to me. So my third son, Braden, was born, and ViaCord sent a courier. They sent a courier to the hospital to take the blood immediately.
Your new son, it wasn't as if, I think that people hear about Mary and they know that it's sort of a painful thing, a very difficult thing, but he didn't have to be involved at all in the treatment because that's correct, right? Because
It's a
the
really
stem cells
good
had been
point,
collected.
right? So they don't hurt. They didn't touch the baby at all. It's usually medical waste, the umbilical cord, and so then you're waiting. And I think it was about 6 weeks later, and obviously I was praying the whole time and trying to be hopeful. And I remember actually getting the phone call while I was on my knees, honestly, and they told me that it was a perfect match. And so the transplant was an option because they wouldn't do the transplant otherwise. They wouldn't do it without a family member, and there was still only a 50% chance of survival of the transplant. So it was still, it was hope. It was hope in a dark place, but it wasn't a guarantee. That was what I was searching for in those books they gave me. They give you this huge stack of books and you're flipping through, doesn't apply, doesn't apply, doesn't apply. You go everywhere, you're just searching for hope. So this whole thing is just about having hope that you can survive. And the opportunity that ViaCord offers people, there's no price for that.
When you're going through this process, you decide to use ViaCord, they collect the cells, and it's a match. What happens next? You have a chance now, but what do they do?
One of the things that was so terrifying to me when we were getting ready for transplant is thinking about, they took this blood from my hospital room, and now they're bringing it back, and they're going to infuse it into my son who has no immune system and not a single living blood cell in his body.
Right.
What if someone coughed on it? What if someone sneezed on it? What if they mixed it up? What if they lost it? What if somebody just made one little error?
Right.
With no immune system, we got a call that the cord blood had made it safely to the hospital, that the frozen units had come in there, and then they keep them for the transplant. The doctors are all alerted, and so everything goes into motion to prepare someone for transplant.
So when he was getting the transplant, did he know where it was coming from?
He was very ill.
Yeah.
And they're on so many medications. He was really just surviving because between the chemotherapy and then they do total body radiation for a week, the doctors say they bring them to the verge of death before transplant. So they have to bring them to that brink where they have to actually kill every blood and bone marrow cell in a person's body and then infuse the new and hope it will graft. Within 6 months, he was off every single medication. And to this day, he takes 0 medication. He is just about as tall as me, which stunted growth is one of the effects of this medication.
But you're tall, for the record.
I have heels on.
No, but you're tall.
But he's come through it. He takes no medication. He's healthy. He's a good student. So really, he's defied all the odds. It's been amazing to learn more about ViaCord, and it's been 8 years since his transplant, and we've been able to keep a relationship. They've just been wonderful. They have no idea, as much as I tell them how grateful I truly am that we have our family, because like I've said before, it's not just, they saved my son's life. They helped save my son's life, but they also saved our family. Blaze went back to the doctors, I think it was for his 5-year visit, 5-year post-transplant visit, and they told us that he doesn't ever have to go back. So that's really nice because they don't tell you that with a cancer diagnosis. It's usually for life.
Right.
But they never could find any side effects. They could never find anything to continue treating him for. So they said, the doctor actually told us he'll never be cured before he had his transplant. He said, you might go into remission, but he'll never be considered cured. That same doctor told us, your son is now considered cured. You don't need to ever come back to the cancer center. And I really wanted to remind him, you told me that would never happen. But I did, and I just said, thank you. So,
That must have felt pretty good walking out of that place.
Yes.
Yeah.
Knowing you don't ever have to go back, he doesn't have to go back. So,
If you could talk to parents that are trying to make this decision, knowing it's not an easy one, what would you tell them to do? Like, what advice would you give them to help them make a decision that's right for them?
well, if cord blood banking is available to you and affordable to your family, I can't imagine a reason why you wouldn't do it. It can be used for so many things besides what our family used it for, and there's so much research going on. exploding field, why would you not purchase it? Our hospital bills just from that year in the hospital were over $1 million. And so I can't even imagine, like, the cost of banking blood is so small compared to everything else we do to care for our children, that if, they call that cord blood liquid gold in the hospital. The transplants doctors and nurses call it liquid gold because that's what it is. And they call the transplant day your child's new birthday.
So do you guys still celebrate his new birthday?
We do. We usually have a big party, and we'll have friends and family over and do something fun.
So he has 2 birthdays now.
He does.
You got to tell him that
spoiled
the only
way.
other person that has 2 birthdays is the Queen of England. It's true.
Okay, that's
There
good.
you go. Good company. Sounds a little bit like my house. Thank you. Can I give you a hug?